Hi, I'm Sarah,
And I'm Tess.
and this is the Basically Bookish podcast.
We're all caught up on the Empyrean series and want to talk about our thoughts on Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. This review will contain spoilers for the entire series up until this point. So if you haven't read it yet, do that first and then come back to us.
Onyx Storm is the third book in the Empyrean series and follows Violet Sorrengail as she and her quest squad search for the seventh den of dragons. This fast-paced island-hopping adventure has a second, more secretive motivation as well, to find a cure for venenism.
All right, so first, why don't we start out by talking about things that we liked about the book?
I liked the world building. I liked going from island to island and meeting all the different people and searching for the den. I thought that that was a great plot for the book.
I did. I enjoyed that as well. I liked the fast-paced nature of the book. I felt like I was going on a ride and that there was things constantly happening and we were bopping around all over the place. And just for like a vibe read, I found that very fun.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I also agree with you. I really loved seeing more of the world geographically and learning more about like the religious aspects of this world. I thought that that was some good world building, although I wish that it went a little bit deeper, to be honest.
Right. Yeah, I did think it was a little surface level,
But
but
let's take some of the things we like.
right, exactly. Um, one thing that I wanted to point out that I really liked is I felt like the characters were more contemporary in this book. They had more attitude, they had more pushback, they made funny little references to each other, and I thought that was fun.
I agree.
The cast just feels very young.
I also really loved all the comedy in this book. I thought there was a lot of comedic relief from like the little one-liners from Riddick and others. And also just like Endarna animatedly talking to this group of elders who are like, oh my God, what is happening? There was like a lot of funny little moments that I really did enjoy.
Right, and Taryn, his usual shtick.
Mhm.
One of the first things that I thought, just speaking about Tarn, that I thought was really cool that we learned from the prologue was that General Melgren's dragon Coda and Tarn come from the same family, the same den. You know, I like the dragon lore, so I'm just really interested by that because Melgren and Tarn are the two largest dragons.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that is
Yeah.
super, super interesting. I also really enjoyed learning more about Eric. I hope that he becomes a bigger player in the next books. And I liked getting a little bit more insight into the other characters. Like, I actually enjoyed popping into the other POVs that weren't just Violet or Xaden and getting to see like the relationships between Riddick and his dragon and learning that they have like a prank war happening
Yeah.
and just seeing, other people's motivations and inner dialogues, I thought was really nice and is a great way to bring us closer to those other characters because right now we've got a really big cast of characters and it feels like most of them only exist to interact with Violet and Xaden.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I was wondering, is this the first time in the series where we've gotten a point of view that wasn't Xaden or Violet?
I think so.
And it was both Imogen and Rhiannon.
Right.
Yeah, I liked Imogen's relationship with her dragon. I thought that it was just, it's funny. The female dragons are just funny because I think we're used to like Daddy Tarn. And so listening to the motherly female dragon was very fun.
I agree.
Of course, I paid close attention to the little addendums at the beginning of each chapter because I know that those can hide all types of information. And I thought the opener for chapter one was really fascinating. It starts out with Violet Sorrengail's permanent addendum to the Book of Brennan. And having been raised religiously, that does not sound like a history book to me. That sounds like a religious book, like a biblical book, the Book of Brennan. It's just kind of changed from it sounding mostly historical, like some sort of
Retrieved correspondence.
right. Yeah. It seems like whatever paperwork or books are left at the end are archival quality. It's just starting to give a real religious, larger than just the continent. It's giving like there's something more going on there. The Book of Brennan just has like a very overarching feel to it.
Absolutely. That kind of sums up everything that I liked about the book.
Right. There were a couple of things that I thought were fun, but we can get into those. But yes, go ahead. Tell me what you disliked about the book because I've been interested. I want to know.
Okay. Like we were saying earlier, I feel like things stay on a very surface level. There's a lot of death that happens, but it's not any characters that we're emotionally attached to. well. Like Traeger, for a second there, I was starting to remember who he was and where he fit into the story, and then he was gone. Which kind of leads me into another point, which is that I felt like all of the conflict was resolved way too quickly. One of the really big emotional points that I felt in this book was when Andarna left. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that just happened. Like, I think that was the one time reading this book that I actually cried, physically cried, because it was written very intensely, very emotionally, and it really hit for me. And for her to come back in the same book, like probably 100 pages later, felt so anticlimactic. And it felt like there could have been so much more that happened that Violet needs to overcome before Andarna comes back. So that's one example of things being concluded too quickly. I also thought that the Theophany could have potentially been a very interesting villain who has all of this knowledge. She's aligned with Violet's mother, and we're introduced to like another big bad, right? And she's killed in the same book.
Right.
Yeah, so that really annoyed me. Also thought that all of the side characters, the cast is so confusing. There are too many characters. There's no need for this many characters. If you're gonna have Cadet A be killed, just call them Cadet from Second Wing. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Having so many names and not being able to decipher who is important and who is not and who's just a throwaway character, it makes it so hard to follow the story and to get invested in anybody.
I totally agree with you about getting rid of Andarna. The amount of pages, the shock that it took to remove Andarna. And it was just like we suspected that Andarna's kind of represents the side of Violet that isn't attached to Xaden. To make such a commitment as a writer to remove that character and then not stick to that commitment. And for what? What did Andarna do when she came back? She was like there and she wasn't really needed to kill Theophany. It was kind of being taken care of. And so it was just unclear what that was for. Also, not to skip ahead, but with the eggs missing and Xaden missing, I felt like having Andarna be with Xaden would have provided more storyline where possibly Andarna needed to come back and retrieve those eggs to take back to her kind. And Xaden was protecting her and it was Andarna who wanted to take those eggs. So without Andarna and Xaden being together, I'm confused as to what's going on.
Yeah, and why? What was the point of that entire plot?
Right. I thought it was a really strong move to remove Andarna. I thought, okay, she did it. Finally, we knew this was coming. And I also thought that being able to like break the bond and then right at the end, when Andarna comes back, Violet can hear Andarna. So does that mean the bond's restored or is that part of the Irids just being able to talk to whoever they want?
You're right, I'm not sure. A lot of unanswered questions, and I do understand that this is the third book in a series, but I think that my biggest overall gripe with this book is that it ends essentially where the last book ended. So it feels like this entire process, we did a lot of things, like we were running around with our like heads cut off, going like island hopping, doing a bunch of things. By the way, all of the islands fell under the same beats as well. So by the third island, I was like, I get it, I'm over it.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, we left on Iron Flame, and it's like, oh no, Xaden's a Venin. And then we end Onyx Storm, and it's like, oh no, he's really a Venin.
Big time Venom.
It's like, why? It's, 500 pages. What are we doing, Yaros?
Yeah, right. Very good point.
Another conflict that gets resolved way too quickly is Mira.
Right.
Mira dying would have made a lot of sense in this moment. And once again, a few pages later, and she's fine. And this also brings up something else that just grinds my gears is that I feel like Sloane is actually going through more of an emotional journey over Violet's mother's death than Violet is.
Right.
Like by this book, I actively dislike Violet. The first couple books, I found her a little young, a little annoying, a little single focused. Like, I'm so glad that we don't have as many lines that are like, he's so hot. He's so hot in this book, because that was making me crazy. But Violet seems to have no other motivations but being super horny for Xaden. And I just don't understand why she has so many people in her corner when it seems like time and again, her only motivation is Xaden.
Right. And I think Riddick sort of voiced that, right? He was sort of the voice of opposition that was like, wait, we're doing this all for Xaden. And yeah, she doesn't really provide much information, except for that she provides the very specific details that if he was caught doing anything that would harm her or Andarna or Taryn, and then at the very end of the book, we see that he's caught doing something, taking those eggs, which could potentially harm them. So that might be the line that her and Riddick had agreed on. But I
Right.
also found Xaden to be very childish. And there were a couple times where I had to stop, especially in the beginning of the book, and be like, is that Xaden talking like that? He was so insecure and pushy and just not the type of character that we remembered from the last book.
Not at all. And unfortunately, I feel like we start to veer into territory where it's like a toxic relationship that somebody's justifying to themselves.
Right.
And also, Violet, why is your line that if he hurts you,
Right.
then he's not Xaden anymore?
Right.
I don't know. I really just did not. This was my least favorite book in the series. And I don't know if it's because it was rushed. I don't know if it's because this really should have been a trilogy and she just needed things for them to do and for us to buy another book. But I just felt like this one was not it for me. I had fun reading it. I will admit that.
The island hopping was fun.
Yeah,
It
it
was
was
fun
fun.
to see all the different people. Even in just the prologue, there's a portion where Violet is defending Xaden to Andarna, and she says, he's still Xaden. He's my Xaden. I mean, that was just happening in the prologue. So I feel like that was really setting the tone. I felt in the beginning like it was just going to be a lot of like 60 chapters of her just being like, but I love him and he's my Xaden, and needing to defend Xaden to Andarna is a red flag for sure.
Yes, which also brings up a little bit of a problem that I have with the world in general. I feel like, okay, one, I want to know more about the Empyrean. The series is the Empyrean series, and we still don't know anything about like the dragon politics, really. But if Dragonkind's number one mission is to protect Dragonkind, right? And they choose riders who are worthy to bond with, then how can they bond with writers who could turn venom? How could they bond with writers like Jack Barlow? How could they bond with writers like Dane's dad or the other guy who wants to like experiment and look at feather tails? How could, you know what I mean?
Right. And then on that same line, the only relationship that we really see the inside of that's Venin is Sigale and Xaden, right? And it's almost as if Veninism is new because how come they can't draw on some information? Like Sigale's however many years old, much older than a human life. And so they've been around for a while and they've never seen this before. They've never seen a rider turn Venin that was bonded to a dragon. How come there isn't any rules around this? How come there isn't any like, that's the final line? It felt like after the first book that Xaden and Sigale were over, that their relationship bond was gone. And now to have him have even further marks, he's now got red marks on his face. And for Sigale to still stand there and be like at a loss for what to do felt really confusing. It's almost as if it's like a new thing, right?
Yeah, I see. I wish we knew more, and I wish that there was actual like concrete structure to this world because I feel like a lot of the magical rules that we established in like books one and two are broken. Being able to break the bonds, being able to channel in a place where supposedly there's no magic. And like I know that technically Xaden channeled from her conduit, but there's all of this speculation about when she's fighting the queen in the place that worships Dune. There's all this speculation because she's fighting, she needs more power, right? And then like suddenly there's lightning that strikes right where they're fighting. What are the odds for that? And there's like two or three different characters. Like Mira asks her, Xaden asks her, I think one of the dragons even asks, like, did you channel? And she's like, no, there's no power here. I can't channel. So I feel like the rules that we established are being broken. And like, I get that this is like a fun fantasy read, but like, it's not a fantasy read. It's a fun romantasy read. It's a little bit more like pop culture. It's a little more like accessible, but I would like the world to make more sense than it currently does. And I would like for those rules that we establish in that world to stay consistent so I can understand that world more.
Right. Completely. Yeah. And one thing I thought was really interesting, Xaden can read minds just like Irids can. And Violet has the same hair color as the people on Dune. And I know that we learn a little bit about that and her dedication, but what did you think about the illegal dedication and Violet's grandparents cutting off Violet's parents?
So I think that it brings up a lot of questions. And I wish I remember the name of this TikToker, but there was this one hilarious TikToker that was like, this is how you read fantasy. Like, it's not going to make sense. You just keep reading until it makes sense. And you're going to be like, oh, I get it. And then you're like, no, I don't get it. And then you're like, oh, I understand. And you're like, no, I don't understand. And then at the end, you're still going to be like, I kind of get it, but that was fun.
Yeah, I don't get it, but I have opinions on it.
Right. Like I felt like this brought up a lot more questions. I did think that it added to the texture and the depth of the world overall, but there were so many more questions, especially like, what do you mean our writer with the heart of a scribe doesn't know the name of the continent? Because I feel like we got mention of Malik. I mean, we're talking about Malik so much, and that could be because they're at Basgiath, which is like a death college. But we don't know about how they worship Dune. We don't know what this dedication entails. We don't know what the correspondence is between Dune and the silver hair. We don't know any of that. And with Amari, we don't even know how people in Navarre worship Amari. We don't know those practices. We don't know any of that. And I'm so sorry, but I have to compare it to Throne of Glass, which we're currently covering if anybody is interested. But in Throne of Glass, we have funeral dirges. We've got different arts and tapestries that are depicting the past. We have all of these references that makes the world so rich and feel so real and feel so lived in. Whereas this feels like we're living in this world, but we have no idea about any of it. And we're getting all of our information through the eyes of somebody who's supposed to know the most. So it's very confusing to me.
Right. Yeah. I think it really speaks to the continuity of the author because Sarah J. Maas in Throne of Glass, she spread out those books. I mean, those books were written over a decade or more. And these books are being written over just the last, is it been a year?
Something like that, 2 years maybe.
And yet we still aren't able to put together the magic system, the religious system. And also, not to pick a bone with you as well, but I understand that the islands aren't on the map because Violet doesn't have a complete map, but we aren't Violet. Can we just have a map at the beginning that includes all of the islands? I kept wanting to look to see where they were, and there isn't even a section in the map that includes the islands. And like, I understand that that's part of it, but also I'm not Violet. I'm not in this world. Can I just see where these locations are? I thought that would have been helpful.
I agree.
Little bit, little bit.
I agree.
I felt like the entire book, it was just a warm up for us accepting the fact that Violet's going to be Venin. Like I kept feeling like they kept trying to like soft launch that Violet was Venin with the lightning strike and just that they're making it seem like it's so easy to pull from the source and that it doesn't feel like selling your soul or it doesn't tear you apart the way that it felt like it did at the end of Iron Flame. Then at the end, Taryn definitely tells her to draw from the source. He definitely tells her to pull from the source when they're in a tough spot. So what do we think about that?
Ooh, I didn't catch that, the Taryn part. So one, I think that that would be a fascinating story and to kind of like dive into the Venin and what's going on with that, just like what you were saying when we were talking about like our predictions and how we first thought that the Paromish writers or the Promish flyers, I should say, were evil, and then we figure out that they're not evil. It'd be great to learn something more about the Venin in that way. But I don't know if that is the case simply for the fact of the off-page marriage that we get at the end of the book, which sets up Violet to take over Tyrrendor.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. The entire book, I thought that she was going to become Venin, and now I just see that she's a Venin sympathizer. Okay, let me just get on my little soapbox, something that I could talk about forever. And Darna's family leaving her behind. I'm sorry, if you leave your baby dragon egg behind, you don't get to come back however many hundreds of years later and have a commentary on how that baby dragon turned out. You don't even get to have a commentary on the friends that she has or how her friends are or anything. You actually get to have no commentary on that. So
Great. I'm with you, girl. I'm with you.
Let me tell you about it.
Oh, yeah, that was heartbreaking. And also, I think we were texting about this, but another really interesting theme that could have been explored in this book, in this 500 plus page book, is the privilege of being a pacifist. And I think that there's like one line that acknowledges that whole concept. But that could have been such an interesting thing to flesh out if Yaros had taken the time.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I wanted to talk about Violet's second signet and how she's a dream walker and how this is kind of a form of intrinsic, I guess. It's like Inception, sort of.
Yeah, it was a little like womp womp for me. Like, I don't
I
know.
was bummed. Yeah, I kind of wanted it to be, like a cool one, like when Andarna stopped time. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, okay, a side rail a little bit. I'm sorry. But why is a precog okay, but an intrinsic is not?
Right. And a dream walker is going to be killed like an intrinsic? I don't think so. I've never woken up from a dream and be like, I'm going to start a war.
Yeah, and also the dreams that I have, it'd be like, okay, great, there's a crab in the sky.
Right.
And you're like, oh no, all of her teeth are falling out again.
Right. And they also don't seem to be dreams. I mean, like, aren't these things kind of actually happening? It's strange. I don't think they're actually dreams. That was underwhelming. I agree.
Yeah, we'll just have to see. Books by Michelle said it best when she said, if nothing else, I am a victim of hype. And I will also be reading this entire series because I too am going to be reading what the girlies are reading.
Right, 100%. So I listened to like the last five chapters more than once, and I picked up something that I hadn't learned the first two times that I listened, which was that Quinn, the first thing that Quinn says to Imogen when they're on the parapet is, "Hi, I've decided you and I are going to be friends." And Imogen says, "Don't you realize we're about to die?" And Quinn says back, "If that's the truth, well, at least we'll make it a good one." And that is the last thing that Quinn says to Imogen as she's dying, and we made it a good one. And I know that we didn't know Quinn like too well, but watching Quinn die in Imogen's arms and Imogen begging her to stay and doing everything that she could was just really hard to watch.
Yeah, I agree. I got pretty misty-eyed at that point too. But I was also a little bit confused because I was like, you can't tell me that Imogen is not gay. But we also got all of these like hints
Yeah.
that her and Garrick have like a little thing. So I'm just like,
Right.
I don't know these characters at all.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was very confusing.
I thought that was like, yeah, they were like, girlfriend and girlfriend.
Right. I kind of thought that was who she meant.
Yeah, but yes, it got me too.
So then, as you know, we are both covering Crown of Midnight right now and going through the Throne of Glass series and this. And I did notice that when we're in Imogen's chapter, that she says that Violet dispatched an inhuman amount of venom. And I just love every now and then when that dispatch word comes up. So I think we should also probably have like a dispatch counter because I swear that word is never used in real life, but is just randomly used to describe murder in fantasy, which is very funny.
I also love that. Really quickly, where do you hope that the series goes from here?
I very specifically hope that we get to see more of the religion. I feel like there's something larger than what's happening in the continent going on somewhere with either the Empyrean or with the gods that are mentioned several times. And so I do want to level up and see if there's something there that we can learn more about. Maybe that's where the information that we're looking for is. I am hoping for that. Just a greater level of detail on the larger things that they've touched on but haven't given detail on.
Yeah, I'm with you too. I normally hate the separation trope, but if that's what it's going to take for us to actually really do some true heavy lifting when it comes to the world building so we can understand where we are in this world, I'm here for it. And I really do hope that we get to see more of the Empyrean, more of the dragons, and how they interact with each other, their own way of governing things, and we learn more about the magic system in general.
Right. And I hope that we get to learn more about Brennan and his past and Taryn's past as well, because they're like off limit right now. And I want to know.
Right. Yeah, all of the side characters. I want more of them. I want to see them interact with each other. I want them to have their own motivations. I want them to have their own lives of their own.
Right.
Where would you rank this series, like out of 5 stars?
Yeah, I think I'd give it 3 because it's continuing on a magical system that I enjoy with dragons. But I agree with you. We didn't progress the story at all. We know nothing of all of the cliffhangers, and it was a 500-page filler, it feels like.
I'm giving it a 3 as well. But overall, still enjoying the series. Again, we will be reading the rest of them. And we'll probably film some sort of recaps. I don't know if we'll do a full-on deep dive, but we'll definitely at least recap each
Yeah,
book.
yeah, absolutely.
Before you go, we'd love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the Empyrean series so far? Do you have a favorite dragon?
If you've enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. We're a brand new podcast, and your reviews help us so much.
Thanks for spending part of your day with us, especially if you made it all the way to the end of this episode. And if you've made it all the way to the end of this episode on YouTube, leave us some sort of animal themed emoji just to let us know you made it this far.
Join our book club by subscribing to the Basically Bookish Pod YouTube channel or follow us on Instagram and TikTok under the same name. And until next time, happy
Happy reading.
reading.